Good morning. Welcome to the Spring 2020 Presidential Lecture with Greg Miller, who is going to be speaking to us about lessons learned in business and adventure. We do this in partnership with the Executive Lecture Series with the Woodbury School of Business, and we'd like to thank Reed and Christine Holliday for their support of that. I'd now like to invite President Tuminis to come up and to introduce Greg. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Hanovitz. Welcome, everybody. How are you feeling today? You're sitting in green seats, and when you're sitting in green seats, it always feels good, doesn't it? When I was fairly new as president of UVU, my Vice President Scott Cooksey took me for a visit to a very interesting museum in Salt Lake City. This is a Land Cruiser museum. Have any of you been there? And I met this gentleman, Greg Miller, and in fact, I was asking him to donate your map, you know, that 3D map of Utah in the mountains. But that's how I met Greg Miller, and he was describing these vehicles and the memories of family vacations on the Land Cruisers. Showed me this Land Cruiser that had gone to Antarctica, totally juiced up with rather massive wheels. And I just kept listening to him, and I thought, he's a man of adventure, you know? Man of adventure. I said, you need to come to UVU and share who you are and what you've done and these amazing things that you've done in life with our students, because I think we will all have a lot to learn, not just the students, but staff and faculty. And it is so important to me that we here at UVU listen to people from whom, we could be inspired and informed and become better at what we do ourselves here at the university. And now I have an official bio that I'm going to read. Greg Miller is an American businessman, philanthropist, and adventurer. His career has encompassed leadership responsibilities in such diverse areas as real estate, auto dealerships, and professional sports. Utah Jazz, yay. His efforts to strengthen communities have impacted many, and his travels have yielded unprecedented feats. Greg's twin passions for off-road vehicles and the great outdoors are paired happily in Salt Lake City's Land Cruiser Heritage Museum. The museum displays more than 100 models of Toyota's finest product, and of which Greg is the founder, chairman, and curator. Greg co-conceived and led Expedition 7, a 58,196-mile global expedition that marked the first instance of a single vehicle being driven on all 7 continents. More recently, he led the first successful traverse of the long axis of Greenland's ice cap in motorized vehicles. Greg's mother is here, Gail. We want to welcome you and acknowledge you and thank you. Do you ever worry about this guy? Does he phone you when he's on one of the other continents? Okay, Gail, man. So obviously she's a mother of adventure also. And I want to acknowledge Heidi Miller as well, Greg's wife, who now serves on our UVU Foundation board. Thank you, Heidi. Do you get phone calls as well? Okay, and you must go on some of the adventures too. A little bit, all right. Long before Greg was crossing continents in Land Cruisers, he was sweeping the lot at his family's Toyota store near Salt Lake City. I can't even say how much I respect that sentence, that he was sweeping the lots, because that's where it begins. In the decades that followed, Greg assumed increasing levels of responsibility with a growing family business. In 2008, he became CEO of the Larry H. Miller Group of Companies, and in this role, he was responsible for the overall strategy of a family-owned business with thousands of employees and billions in revenue. Greg streamlined operations and increased productivity and profitability. He also championed the expansion of the enterprise, and during his tenure, Miller Holdings spread from a footprint of 12 Western states to a national presence, with assets and revenues posting average annual growth rates over 5%. That sounds like UVU's enrollment growth. Greg ensured that all entities operated according to principles of integrity, hard work, stewardship, and service, with the ultimate purpose of enriching lives. By the end of his tenure, the company was stronger than it ever was before. Greg also serves on the board of the Sutherland Institute and was honored with their 2018 New Birth of Freedom Award. He serves on the Utah Office of Tourism Board of Directors and is a member of Solamere Capital's Executive Partner Group. I assume this is a private equity. Greg and his wife Heidi support families and communities through the Sherry Black Foundation, which they established in the memory of Heidi's mother, and we have been the beneficiary of that with the books that were donated to our library, so we're very grateful. The foundation facilitates the training of law enforcement officers in the latest methods of investigating violent crimes. The Millers reside in Salt Lake City. They have 6 children and 9 grandchildren. You've been productive between the time this was written. 9 grandchildren. So we welcome you with so much warmth here at UVU. Thank you, and we are so eager to hear from Greg Miller. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Greg Miller.
Well, thank you, President, for that wonderful introduction. And I'd just like to start by saying that our family really values our relationship with UVU. And thank you for all you've done to make us feel so welcome. I should also mention, my mom just reminded me, some of you may have heard that she's been on one of the adventures with me. And a little more detail to that. As I recall, that was about 2 days after she got married to her husband, Kim. And they went with us for 21 days, so 21 of their first 23 days of marriage, they were sleeping in the back of a pickup truck with me. So, thanks for that. Well, thank you for being here today. It's a pleasure for me to be with you. And I'm thankful for the opportunity to share a few of the lessons that I've learned along my journey. And I've found that there are many facets, or many areas of crossover between personal and business with regard to the lessons that I've learned along the way. And I hope that something that I share today is helpful with you and is meaningful to you. And I've learned from giving these presentations that I often get excited and start to wander, so I've tried to be disciplined, and I've actually written notes to help me stay on track, so excuse me if I refer to those. Otherwise, we may be here all day. So a few years ago, I embarked on a global expedition, and the goal was to travel across all 7 continents. It was an undertaking that was so ambitious that we actually gave it a name. And the name is Expeditions 7, or E7 for short. And if any of you are interested, you can learn more about it at expeditions7.com. And as has been mentioned, the goal was to be the first team to drive the same vehicle across all 7 continents. So we started in North America. From there, we went to Iceland and Europe, where my mom and Kim spent their time in one of those vehicles. Then the next leg was Russia and Siberia, a journey of 8,000 miles. Then across the outback of Australia. Then Africa, Antarctica, and South America. And I'm going to pause right here just to give you a little bit of context. The goal to drive the same vehicle on all 7 continents was achieved, and it's this vehicle that you see up here on the left. That vehicle is the only vehicle that's ever been on all 7 continents. But we only drove it a short distance in Antarctica, because in order to do a full traverse of Antarctica, it would have needed to be modified beyond a point where we could reverse the modifications and have it in its usual format for display in the museum. So we decided to modify it as far as we could, be able to reverse it, and then just use it. We probably drove it 100 miles in Antarctica. But then for the big journey, we took this red truck that you see right here, which is also on display now at the museum. But it was much more suited, much better suited for 3,200-mile drive across the bottom of the earth. So you'll hear me talk more about that truck today, and as my message goes on. So as I was driving across, well, let me before when I got home at the end of the expedition, and I read my journal, I wrote in every single day of the expedition. I can't believe I was disciplined enough to do that, but I'm really proud of it, and I'm glad that I captured those emotions when I did, because even now when I read them, it's hard for me to remember some of them. So don't delay writing in your journal, I guess, is one lesson. But I was surprised to see how many lessons I'd recorded in my journal. And I sat down with the help of a friend, Andrew Johnson, who's with us here today and has helped me put this presentation together. And we started to list them out, and we identified 33 of these lessons that fall into one of 5 categories. And I'd like to share some of those with you today. And I've shared these lessons, I've kind of picked them out of here, these 5, deliberately for this audience. And I hope that they are, again, that they're as applicable to you and as valuable to you as they have been to me. So these are the 5 lessons. The power of delegation, be open to learning always, being a force for peace, making a difference for good wherever you are, and surrounding yourself with the best people you can. Before I go much further into those lessons, I'd like to share some context about the expedition in Greenland. When I was in Antarctica driving that red truck back to the air base, which is on the edge of Antarctica from the South Pole, it was a long, boring drive, and it was a really bumpy drive. I had a lot of opportunity to think, and I thought, now that I've been to the South Pole, it'd be kind of neat to drive this truck to the North Pole. And for those of you who don't know, there are huge geological differences between the South Pole and the North Pole. The South Pole is basically a continent. It's rock with 2 miles of ice covering it. And on the North Pole, it's just an ice sheet. It's maybe 10 feet thick, and it floats on water, and there's no rock underneath it. And there are always currents underneath it that are pulling and tugging on that ice sheet that create open leads. Where the ice pulls apart, it's called an open lead. And where those ice sheets collide, it's called a pressure ridge. And as you can imagine, both of those conditions, open leads and pressure ridges, make it difficult to travel across, whether you're in a car or in a sled or skiing or anything. So in April of 15, I flew to the North Pole to do a little recce trip and just see if it would be feasible to drive across it and try to drive to the North Pole. And my recce trip confirmed my skepticism that it just wasn't practical. The ice was too thin, the leads were too prevalent, the pressure ridges were too high, and I didn't want my truck to fall through the ice and not get it back. So I began to look for an alternative, and after maybe a year and a half, I concluded that Greenland would be the perfect surrogate for that. And so we began planning a journey across Greenland. Now, before I get too much further into the Greenland part, I wanted to mention that when I was I was actually about 150 miles from the South Pole. We ran into another expedition that happened to have Prince Harry as part of the expedition. And unfortunately, this was before he and Meghan were a thing, so she wasn't with him. But it was still cool to meet him. And I wish we had more time to tell you some of the stories about him, because when I pulled up to camp, I saw him. We knew he was going to be there, and somebody said, "There's Prince Harry." He was standing in the back of a truck helping the people in his expedition load bags into the back of his truck. So for royalty to be doing the work of a peasant was kind of interesting, but it wasn't surprising as we got to know him a little bit. So back to the North Pole and Greenland. This was a journey of about 3,000 miles, and there are numerous challenges with this, as you might imagine. Greenland has 57,000 residents. 17,000 live in the capital city of Nuuk, which is about right here, and the other 40,000 live around the perimeter, and there's just not a lot of infrastructure anywhere. There's no roads to speak of. I think there's 17 miles of roads on the entire island, and no fuel stations around the perimeter. And so in order to make this happen, we did the expedition in March and April of 18, but I had to decide whether I was going to do it or not in September of 17, because in order for us to have the fuel where we needed it when we were doing the expedition, we had to order it. We had to buy it out of Denmark and have it shipped from Denmark to a port right in here. Sorry, it's right in here, so it could be flown to these dots that you see. Otherwise, the port would have been frozen, and there would be no way to get the fuel there in March and April, because the port would still be frozen in March and April. It doesn't usually thaw out till June. So that's just one little illustration of the logistical complexity of this trip. And so the fuel drops dictated our route, and we started here on the south end and went to Dai 2. That's an abandoned, distant early warning station that was fascinating. There's a little bit about that in a clip I'm going to show you in just a minute. First fuel position, second fuel position. And so we were basically connecting the dots. Little side note, the reason we did this detour here is because there are crevasses right here. The crevasses are basically cracks in the ice that get covered by snow bridges, and you don't know they're there until it's too late in most cases, if they're not visible. And the goal was to get all the way up here to Wolfland. So it was a great adventure with a great story. And in fact, we produced a documentary that I'm in the process of trying to get distributed. We submitted it to Sundance, and we went right to the final cut, and then they notified us the last day that it didn't make that cut. So we're hoping to hear about Telluride Mountain Film Festival in the next week or so, and we're working to get it distributed for public consumption. I think it's a great story, and it's one that I hope to share and hope to inspire people with. And I happen to have just a trailer for the video right here.
Doing an expedition in Greenland is, what was the word? Ambitious.
I wanted something else that was challenging, something that had never been done before, something that was, let's say, unprecedented.
There has been one notable expedition that crossed Greenland from the west coast to the east coast, but no one had even considered trying to do it from south to north because the distances were an order of magnitude more. We were in literally uncharted territory.
To me, it was really simple. We just had to cover 150 miles a day. And if we could do 150 miles a day for 20 days, we would cover all the ground we needed. Sounds easy enough. I learned that trying to stick to that schedule was really difficult. We just lost a wheel.
It doesn't seem to be pumping.
At that moment, I was definitely think we are probably pushing beyond our capabilities here. The weather wasn't cooperating, the time was slipping away.
We had had some serious concerns about our safety.
In my mind, we were not able to drive off the glacier if we didn't have a visibility.
We can be so focused on something that we want to achieve in our life that we can start to forget about all of the risks that come along the way.
I am the expedition leader. The safety of every one of these team members is my responsibility, and I must get every one of them back home to their families safely.
Thank you. So am I driving or are you driving? I'm driving. Okay. That's what I do. That's good. So now for the 5 lessons that I'd like to share with you today that have come from my travels. Going to Australia, which was our 4th continent, we knew that we needed an additional truck. I mentioned the truck that couldn't keep up. And as we were getting ready to cross the outback, we decided we needed to buy a truck with the same engine as in the other 2 vehicles. It was a double cab and chassis. It didn't have anything on the back, and there was a lot of work to be done to get this truck outfitted in the time that we had before the team was scheduled to arrive and embark on that leg of the journey. And so I employed one of the things that it's to me proven to be a very valuable practice, and that is delegation. Kurt Williams, who you saw in the video and you'll see again later, was quick to say yes when I asked him to go over and head that up. So we got the truck bought. We had Kurt go over, pick up the truck, drive it 1,000 miles south to get a canopy put on it, and then he got it to another shop where they did all of the other modifications, and it was ready. In fact, he drove to the airport to pick us up when we got there, just after having finished the truck. And so that process of organizing, what needs to be done, prioritizing what matters most, going to work to get it done, and then the accountability to make sure that it meets the standard, it all came to play through that process of delegation and made the trip stay on course, on time, and I would say on budget, but in this case there actually wasn't a budget. We just needed it done. Lesson 2. Be open to learning always. In the Larry Miller Group, we have a phrase, be a student, be a teacher, be a leader. And we believe that if you're learning and you're teaching, those are 2 of the primary elements of leading. And we encourage all of our employees to do those things every day. Once you learn something, you have an obligation to share it. And so it's important to be learning always. And I believe that there are lessons to be learned in every circumstance we find ourselves in every day. The challenge is to be humble enough and perceptive enough to see those learning opportunities when they present themselves. One of the biggest lessons I learned on E7 was how much I didn't know and how much I still have to learn, and how many teachers there are along life's path if we're open and, again, perceptive to see them when they try to teach us. And let's see, how are we doing on time? We're okay? So you got time for a story here? I'll tell you, one of the big lessons that I learned it's not one of the 5 that I had planned to share, but I think it might be helpful, is a lesson that Scott Brady taught me. He's the gentleman that co-produced the trip with me. He was the bald guy in the video. And my very first meeting with him, when we were talking about the route, I asked him a question that is probably the most common question I get. Are we going to take guns on the trip with us? And he just looked at me and smiled, and he said, no, we're not going to take guns. And I said, well, why not? We're going to be in dangerous places. And he said, well, think about it. If we're in a situation where we're confronted by bad guys with guns, you really think we're going to get in a shootout with them? We're not. We're going to do whatever they tell us, and we're going to give them whatever they want, and we're going to hope that they're nice enough bad guys to give us a ride somewhere where there's a phone so we can make arrangements to fly home. And then he added the thing that was the lesson. He said, Greg, the most dangerous thing we're going to do on this trip is drive. And I said, well, what are you talking about? That's what this whole thing's about, is driving. And he said, trust me, by the time we get home, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. So then, when we were driving across Russia, we were about 6,000 miles into our 8,000-mile journey and had probably the one and only real near-death experience we had when Scott was in position 1 in his Land Cruiser. I was in position 2, and a black Mercedes wagon pulled out to pass us on the M56 highway. We were going probably 80 miles an hour. This car had to be going well over 100, and it was right as the road got narrow to a bridge like this, and it was just barely 2 lanes wide, and there was a semi coming the other way, and this BMW or the Mercedes got in just in time to avoid hitting Scott and hitting me. I have no idea how there was no contact made. But Scott, who's unflappable, pulled over, and I pulled over, and Scott was white, and I was, "Are you okay?" And it was just one of those moments where you're just, pinching yourself to make sure you're still alive. And later that night, when we were having dinner, he said, "Now you know what I mean. Driving's the most dangerous thing we'll do." And so just lessons like that. I didn't think of driving being that dangerous, but again, just a little lesson that I picked up. So, lesson 3, the power of equanimity. Now, this is a picture that was taken about 110 miles from our target. And we had been through so much, and we were just wiped out. We hadn't slept for days because we were racing the clock. We didn't have time to set up our camp. We didn't have time to cook proper food, so we were eating out of cellophane and aluminum containers. The guys were just amazing. And we encountered this blizzard. This is not photoshopped. This was the visibility we had. And I said to the guys, if you get out of the truck for any reason, to check on the gear, to use the bathroom, I said, you have to maintain contact with the vehicle, because you can see with visibility like this, if you get turned around and lose sight of the truck and wander in the wrong direction, we'll never see you again. So it was that dire. And the lesson that came to me in this moment was the power of being a force for peace. Because every one of those guys stayed calm and was just more concerned about the other guys than they were about themselves. And they were more concerned, and behind that, their big concern was staying focused on the goal. And they all knew how bad I wanted to make it to Wolfland in the north. And nobody wanted to disappoint me, but obviously safety came first. And so just the way they handled themselves and the peaceful influence that they brought to that stressful and even dangerous situation really made an impact on me. And I hope that that as I go through the rest of my life, I can have that power of influence, that peaceful influence on the people that I interact with, because it made such a strong impression on me. One thing I'll say on this note is that aside from the accomplishment, or I'll say equal to the accomplishment of driving the same vehicle on all seven continents and getting to Wolfland and back safely, the thing that I'm most proud of is that in all the journey combined, which is over 60,000 miles and 250 days, give or take, of being in close quarters, often without a shower, often without good sleep, often without good food, there was never a single cross word spoken among any of the team members. And that just tells you what kind of people they are. And that is, like I say, that ranks up there as one of the greatest accomplishments of this trip with me, for me. And so then, moving on to the 4th lesson, this is a picture of my middle daughter, Alyssa, in Peru. And we were walking in to a restaurant to have dinner, and she saw this young boy. And I don't know if you can see, the photo's kind of small, but these gray Crocs in the lower right corner of the frame, you can see the left one is all but completely come apart. And Alyssa ran back to the car and got these brand new Converse tennis shoes that she had. And actually, she ran back to the car to get her flip-flops because she was wearing the Converse. And she took the Converse off her feet and gave them to the boy. And then she wore flip-flops the rest of the journey home. And that was such a great example of to me, of being able to improve somebody's life in a random situation, total stranger, totally unplanned, but she just brightened this kid's day and probably his week or month, who knows. But there was an opportunity for me to learn what service looks like and how to be a force for good in the world. And I'm thankful to Alyssa for teaching me that lesson. Lesson 5 is the value of being surrounded by quality people who are good at what they do. So this is a photo of the team, and you can see there's 10 of us here, and that includes the trucks. They're part of the family. When they're your restaurant, your kitchen, your hotel, your transportation, you learn to love them. So this was a truck I drove. This was a brand new Hilux that had just been built specifically for the trip. This was a truck that we rented from a gentleman who lives in Norway. And then as far as the team members go, this is Clay Croft. He was our videographer. And when you see the film, and I really hope that one day you will have a chance to, you won't believe that there was one guy with a camera. You'd think there were 12 guys with the number of angles and the sound quality he got. It was amazing. Next to him, Emil Grimson. He was the founder of a company called Arctic Trucks that builds these trucks in Reykjavik. Emil not only helped us round up the trucks that I didn't own, but he's an expert on reading ice images taken from the satellites. And through his company, Arctic Trucks, he's traveled now almost 400,000 kilometers in the north and south Arctic regions, polar regions. Next to him is John Solberg, who is our medical doctor. He runs an ER room in the oil fields of North Dakota, and he specializes in wilderness medicine, and he's also a really funny guy. He was our comic relief, especially once he and Kurt got going. This is me, my role. I couldn't fix a truck. I was okay at navigating. I knew how to drive. I handled the logistics on getting all the trucks there and getting them home. I underwrote the trip. And then I wanted to make a contribution, so I actually cooked. And for those of you who know me, that's a scary proposition. But when you're there, in conditions like that, I guess it was still edible. This is Scott Brady. He's a photographer. He's a driver. He's a veteran adventure traveler. He's a force for calm. And he's a great influence on me. This is Kurt. Kurt and Torvi can fix anything. Kurt lives in Sandy, Utah. Kurt can navigate, he can drive, he can fix things. He was the one that would lead the effort to refuel the trucks. It took us about an hour and a half to refuel all 3 trucks. And Kurt would stand out in that 20 or 30 below for an hour and a half, refueling the trucks whenever that happened. And just a great guy. And then you've heard me talk about Torvi. I call Torvi... he's the gentle Viking warrior. That guy had a spirit the size of this whole campus, and he was so pleasant, and there was just nothing he couldn't do. And so just the privilege I had of being with these guys and working with them to accomplish great things is one of the great blessings of this experience. And it just reinforced what I'd learned in business, that if you want to do great things, you have to surround yourself with great people who are not only good at what they do, but they're good people at heart, and they focus on the greater good. And we had that in this circumstance, and that's why we were able to get there and get home safely. So this is a picture of the northernmost point that we went. This was 81 degrees, 10 minutes north. We're about probably... I would say 450 miles south of the North Pole. And we had just come off the ice sheet here, and we were on rock. It's crazy how fun it was to be standing on a rock rather than ice after being out there for 12 days. And the hope was that we could get all the way to the end of the rock and actually touch the Arctic Ocean. But with all of the mechanical failures and the fire in the tent and other things that we had along the way, there just wasn't time. We spent too much of our time repairing our equipment. So we were lucky to get off the ice and take this picture. We camped here overnight, had a phenomenal dinner of pasta with meatballs in it. It was maybe the best meal I've ever had. And we actually set up the tent, one of only 7 nights out of 20 that we made time to set up the tent and get our mattress pads out, get our sleeping bags out, and get a good night's sleep, and try to just reset for the journey back, because we were anticipating a lot of trouble. One thing I'll tell you that's probably not easy to see, but if you look right here on the rock, we did something that may be a little arrogant, and that is we had a plaque cast in bronze, and it had the names of all of us, and we actually hammer nailed it into that rock. And so there's a memorial there, sort of recognizing the furthest point north that we've ever traveled. Maybe one day I can take my grandkids back and show them. So, we were successful in large part because of the things that I've shared with you today. The ability to spread the load over multiple people, drawing on prior lessons that we learned in life and on Expedition 7, being comforted by and hopefully bringing comfort to my teammates as we work through all of the trials together, and being supported by great people. In my opinion, the best there is at what we needed and what they did. And hopefully this journey and the lessons that it presented and the opportunity to share them in circumstances like this will be a positive force in the world by inspiring others to dream big and do great things. So with that, I am happy to take some questions. Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you so much for that. What a touching presentation. We have 2 microphones here. Both of them, one to my right, one to my left. So if you have any questions, if you'd please come up. We have about 15 minutes. I know some students will need to leave for class, so please feel free to be excused. And why don't we get started with here? Thank you.
So my name's Tyler. What advice would you give to young developing leaders such as myself, just trying to gain experience being a leader?
Could you all hear the question? What advice would I give Tyler as he's aspiring to be a leader? Well, I would say, first of all, work hard to continue to develop your people skills and your relationships with as many people as you can. My dad used to say to me, I can transfer the ownership of the business, I can transfer the control of the business, but I can't transfer the relationships. You have to build those on your own. And as you integrate yourself with other people and show them what you're capable of and learn from them, you will put yourself in a position where you find leadership opportunities. It comes naturally. And then I would say the other thing is just learn how to marshal resources to solve problems. That, to me, is a big part of leadership. And it's being able to find a way through when there appears to be no way through. You just either, through guts and grit or collaboration, you just find a way to get it done. And there's obviously dozens of other leadership attributes, but those are the 2 that come to mind right away.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
My name's Ryan. One of the questions that I have, you spoke a lot about the power of delegation. For people that are parts of team, and obviously we're all part of a bigger team and a bigger picture, what would you recommend to someone that's a part of a team to gain your trust to be able to have something delegated to them? Does that make sense?
I would say just deliver results. For me, when I was in positions of leading companies, what I always appreciated was when somebody on the team said, we've got a problem here, and this is what I'd recommend to solve it. So come with a solution. Again, in my opinion, that built a lot of value in that person. It made them credible, and it made me appreciate them. So I would say just be a solution provider.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I was just curious. You talked about good people. How have you found that you've held to your morals in order to be that good person, and what do you find are common attributes of people who do the same?
Well, I would say that I always tried to follow my conscience when I was growing up, and you meet all kinds of people, you kind of test drive different groups of friends. Then I just followed my gut. If there were friends that were put me in circumstances that I knew weren't right, I probably wouldn't spend as much time with them, maybe no more time with them. So you just you learn. It's a process of experience. And I think that's something that can be practiced and hopefully refined throughout our lives. We keep finding ways to be better. We keep finding ways to inspire others to be better. We seek people who have the same values as us, whether they're good or bad values. We kind of tend to collect with groups of people who share our positions and views, and hopefully, hopefully, at least with the people we love, that's in positive circumstances.
My name is Paul. You talked about being willing to learn all the time, and you mentioned be humble enough to be willing to learn. My observation is when people produce results and they succeed, they stop being humble. And then that's why it's very hard to keep growing an organization. How do you stay humble when you produce results?
I don't know. I don't know how to stay humble. I just know that in my case, I just had the thought hit me years ago that I felt that it's a very arrogant thing to ever think that I knew enough that I could stop learning. And no matter how great an accomplishment I may have or what level of success I may attain, there's always somebody who's done more. There's always somebody who's smarter, bigger, faster, stronger, better looking. And so for me to ever get comfortable at the position I was in was just not right. There was always an opportunity to grow and develop. And I don't know really why that thought came to me, but it's been there, and it's been a driving force in my life, and I hope that I always have it.
Hey, my name's Ty Miller, share our same last name. So growing up, I've grown up in Utah my whole life, so the Miller name I'm very familiar with, the jazz, obviously the dealerships, the theaters now. What does your dad's legacy and the Miller name mean to you, and has that been a driving force in your ambition and your chase of success and growth in your life?
But there's a lot there in that question. As far as the legacy, I hope that our family's legacy is that we were good stewards and that we did everything we could to contribute to the communities that we work and live and play in, and that those communities are better because we were there. As far as the second part of your question about doing things, I don't know if it's in our DNA to try to do big things, but I know that my dad set the bar pretty high, and he made a lot of sacrifices so that we could have a great life and be in a position to do things that others may not be able to. And in some ways, you could say this was an indulgence, but I hope that in other ways it's inspirational, and that others, it doesn't have to be things this big, but it inspires others to do things that they may think are a little beyond their reach right now. And so it's just, maybe in other facets besides the expedition, I would say that with the blessings we've been given, we would be unworthy stewards if we didn't push ourselves and stretch ourselves to do things that are uncomfortable and try to enrich the lives of other people. It's part of what comes with the blessings, I believe.
Mr. Miller, my name's Chris. I love outdoor adventure. And so when I saw the picture of your team members at the conclusion, I'm experienced enough to know that in the background, superimposed in our imaginations, there's other members of that team that weren't photographed, and that would be the members of your family or the families of those team members. So as adventurers or professionals, tell us a little bit more about the role that those team members, our families, the people who are closest to us, our partners, our companions, what role do they fill in attaining our goals, as well as what can we do to help support them as we're attaining our goals?
Yeah, great question. When we have an opportunity to address the significant others of our executives, which we do every January at our Larry H. Miller Leadership Conference. We always take the opportunity to acknowledge the support that, I'll say, the spouses or the significant others give to our executives. And it may not be politically correct, but in the 30 plus years that I ran businesses, one thing that came through loud and clear to me is that domestic turbulence translates to workplace turbulence, and domestic strength translates to workplace strength. And so when I had employees that had a solid, healthy home life, it showed. And that taught me to appreciate the relationship, the partnership that those heads of household had. And I have enormous respect for them, and I know I speak for all of us in that regard, all of our family. And that applies to the expedition as well. If Heidi would have said, "I'm not comfortable with you doing it," she probably doesn't believe it, but I would have stayed home. And that was a driving force. You know, you kind of, in my thought process, when you saw in that clip when I was in the truck and I had my head in my hand trying to sort through it, I was thinking about these people have loved ones at home, and I have a responsibility to those loved ones to get the people on the expedition home with me. So I'm mindful of them. That's a huge part, and I appreciate you pointing that out. It's a huge part of the success of any great endeavor is having the support of the people that love us at home. Anything else?
Hi, I have something.
Yeah,
if that's
there you
okay. My name is Jake, and I was just curious because you've been like working in businesses for 30 plus years and things like that. Just as a business person, and I guess maybe you touched a little bit about this in your presentation with the things you've learned, but what do you think was like one of the greatest things that you've learned being like in the position that you're in? Hope that makes sense.
What's the greatest thing I've learned in, just I guess in my life is what you're asking, right?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't know that I could articulate it succinctly, but I think it has to do with being a positive influence, giving more than you take, enriching the lives of the people that you interact with, and if you can, even, you know, if you have the opportunity and the resources to enrich lives of those who may be a step or two beyond those that you interact with, that plays into it. But it's just using the blessings that I've been given to try to make the world a better place. I know it kind of sounds trite, maybe even corny, but in the things that Heidi and I do with the Sherry Black Foundation, the work I do with my family, in the Larry Miller Group, we talk a lot about what can we do to make things better. How can we enrich lives? How can we do more for our employees? How can we create more jobs? How can we build better facilities to house them? How can we operate our businesses in a more employee-friendly and customer-friendly way? How can we add more value? So if you think about it, there's, you know, we've talked a lot about it. We just boil it down to enriching lives. We believe that our business is a means to an end, that end being to enrich lives. The expedition was great along the way, but in the end, it was to have experiences, and those experiences facilitate relationships, lessons, memories, all things that stay with us a long time, and all things that enrich our lives. So hopefully that gives you an idea. Yeah.
Hi, my name's Bethany. I just had 2 quick questions. So first, have you ever considered writing a book and just really expanding on all those lessons that you showed up there? And the second question is, in your opinion, what would you say to someone who has dreams, realistic ones, but they have obstacles to even start? How to work through that?
Great questions, Bethany. The first one is, on the book, I would love to write a book, but I don't have an attention span long enough to do it. So I would need some help. And I've kind of been keeping my ear to the ground, looking for the right person to help me write the book. And I may be a little bit, I'll say, wrecked by the fact that some of you know that my dad had his biography written before he passed. It was with the help of Doug Robinson. And Doug Robinson, in my opinion, did such a masterful job capturing my dad's voice tone and his word phrases, his personality in that book, that for me, that's the standard. And I don't know that I could ever find the right person that could capture my personality. I would want it to be authentic and genuine, and it's such a foreign idea to me to be able to write a book, so there's a big gap there. And maybe I should take some of my own advice and just take the first step to get it done and get the book written, but I hope to do that someday. And then the second one, as far as advice on people who have aspirations to go on adventures but maybe not the resources. I shared this story earlier today. The experiences and the emotions, the emotions that I experienced on Expedition 7 were perhaps larger in scale and more sustained, but they were very similar to the emotions that I felt when I was 8 or 10 years old, and me and my friend Max went through the slat in the back fence across the field behind our yard, under the culvert to the road, quarter mile out, and that culvert led to a canal that was frozen over. There was water in it, but it was frozen solid, and there was the ditch bank on either side, and it had willow trees growing up. And of course, there were no leaves on them, but standing on that ice, it looked like a tunnel, and we just started going down there. And there was some daylight and stuff, but it was just cool to be on this adventure, and we just started walking down there, and we walked and walked and walked, and finally got to a gravel pit where there was big sand hills that were frozen, and we just climbed up there, and we were, thought we were the king of the world, and it was just a big adventure for an 8-year-old kid, and it didn't cost anything, but it was sure fun. And it sparked something in me that grew into this. And so whatever your circumstances are in life, you can push yourself beyond your comfort zone and get online and find a forum that does what your interests are. Chances are somebody that you're going to see later today has similar aspirations and similar interests. Connect with them and start thinking about how you can do it. For $100, you can have a great time. You can go to Moab over the weekend. You can camp. You could hike. You can... so whatever it is that excites you, just take a step towards it. And you'll be amazed at how things sort of conspire for your benefit to help you realize your dreams. This is a Toyota Hilux. It's a 2012 Toyota Hilux, which is, in North America, we get the Tacoma, and just about everywhere else in the world gets the Hilux. It's kind of the workhorse, common in South America, Africa, Australia. And this was a European model, left-hand drive, that we had modified in Iceland at a company called Arctic Trucks. And they do all kinds of modifications, like they take the rear suspension out and put a swing arm suspension like on a dirt bike, and big tires, big studded tires. And the thing that, I don't know if you'll be able to see, but it has an automatic air inflation, tire inflation system, where we had an iPhone on the dash with an app, and you can just program the tire pressure that you want, and then the air pressure will increase or decrease depending on the level of traction you need. And it's amazing how fast that air pressure changes depending on your elevation and air temperature and other factors. And it was nice to have that feature, because in Antarctica, we had to get out and do all that manually. Get out with the hose and do one tire at a time and let them down, let the air pressure out and stuff. So it was way more convenient to have it all automated. Average temperature in Greenland was probably 20 below. The coldest it got was 40 below ambient temperature, and we figure it was probably minus 80 with the wind at the peak. We were at 12,000 feet. It was pretty cold and windy. The gentleman that you saw that said ambitious, his name's Torvi, and he was our mechanic, our technician, and there was nothing he couldn't fix. And I don't think he slept for the whole journey, 21 days. He was up when I was awake, and he could fix anything. We would probably still be there without him. So the question was, what was the inspiration for the entire expedition? And I have a friend named Scott Brady who is the founder and chairman of Overland International, who's built a business out of doing trips like this, and not as a guide, but more as like the water cooler. Like people talk about him through his magazine and website. And one day he and I were talking about it. It just started spiraling up, and he said, "Yeah, I've got the blueprints to do a trip like that." And so we just kept talking and put the trip together. This was back in 2011. Did we have any vehicles that didn't make it? No. Thankfully, they all came home. We did learn after driving across Antarctica and Europe that one of the trucks that had a smaller engine than the two others was just slowing us down, so we left it in Europe for a while and continued. You'll hear about that in the next story. And then we eventually brought it home, but it wasn't due to mechanical failure.
Clap your hands and thank the speaker.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.